You've heard the news about the weather tonight.
Yeah.
They've canceled thousands of airplanes on the East Coast, and the Boston airport is closing down at, I think they said 8 o'clock. You guys are about to get stocked in.
Stocked in for something big.
Yeah.
Something.
Obviously, something is happening. The symbolism of that ship stuck in ice in Antarctica. The programming on CNN tonight is March of the Penguins in Antarctica. The weather forecast for Monday and Tuesday is again referring to stocking in people so that they can't move in or out of where they are.
Yeah, they said they were closing the highways over here too, because last year they had a storm and people were stuck on the highway for about as much as like 2 days before they could get get help. So they said they're closing the highways at like this evening so people don't even go on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said on that ship only 22 people staying on the ship, and that was that 2-2 symbolism. What does that mean, the 2-2? What is that linked to? I know it's linked to Desmond 2-2.
Well, it's no doubt referring to the preliminary steps towards a major flood. And they've dropped snow followed by freezing rain to make it the heaviest snow to shovel, followed by more snow on top of it, and now they're getting ready for a major snowfall, so anything that hasn't been able to be moved is all going to provide water for the minute it starts melting. And will it start melting at a time when it will break wires, hydro, and affect people for an extended period of time? That's, to me, what we're looking for.
Yeah.
The hint that I got for March the 2nd. Everybody stuck one way or another. I mean, here, to operate the furnace is about $15 a day.
Wow.
Usually you don't get the type of cold weather that lasts a month long, but you could very well get that now.
You're in the negative temperatures tonight, right?
We are 22 below zero centigrade, and it didn't move all day. That's what it was at 7 o'clock this morning, going through overnight, and that's what it is right now. And it didn't change by more than 1 degree during the day. We have 4 goats that have died over the last 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I had to move the goats out of their houses into the chicken coop with the chickens. Of course, goats bang around with each other if they're loose, but I figured that's better that they disagree for a while than to freeze to death outside. Cats, we've lost 2 or 3 cats over the last week or so.
Wow.
Today I killed 2 more chickens to feed the cats a little more meat along with their feed so that they build up some resistance to the cold. But with the number of cats we have, you can be sure there's always 1 or 2 that are marginal at any time, and when they get hit with 3 days in a row now under 20 below, that's a problem. Jennifer is coming up with my supper. I can hear her coming up the stairs. If you want to call me later, you can call me back.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Had a good dinner?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
Nice.
Yeah, they,
keeps you alive from one day to the next.
It does. That it does.
Yeah.
I'm letting my hair hang, Glenn. It's hanging down.
Huh. That's a return journey.
Yes. Now I have to work out a system to open myself up. For
open yourself up.
Yeah, for communication. Type of communication. Well, that's
for that you'll need more cats than your mother will put up.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It just helped me, see the bigger picture, I guess.
It feels like we're entering an important moment in time. I don't know if it's another one of the things they'll short circuit along the way, but certainly at this moment in time, with what I know and what we're doing and the kind of weather we have, it feels like a setup.
They're blocking like old paths to escape, I guess.
Yeah.
Shutting down airports, shutting down highways.
Critical period in time, 23rd of February to the 2nd day of March. Just mark it on your calendars and see if they change anything between now and then. 23rd of February is Terminalia.
That's another name for the border, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it means the end. The end of the property, or the end of book, or the end of the gore.
Yeah, I meant to ask you, did you see the Rose Bowl parade?
The who?
Rose Bowl parade?
Rose Bowl parade. No, I basically even forgot the Rose Bowl because of the weather. I had to take care of the animals in a different manner than usual, which required that I go outside, work for about 10 minutes, run back inside, thaw my fingers, change gloves, wait about another 10 minutes, and then go back out again. What I would normally do in about 40 minutes time would have to take closer to 2 hours running in and out. It's 3 days we are to have temperature in the general area of below 20 centigrade. 15 is below is livable. You can work outside, and even though your fingers are cold and your toes are cold, they don't feel frozen. But beyond 15 degrees centigrade, feeling is one of burning sensation you get in your fingers and toes and face. So you have to choose whether you want to have your fingers fall off or run into the house. Cats seem to be able to deal with it even though they don't like it. Most of them seem to be able to survive beyond 15, the goats are shivering. And that's the way they've been now for 2 days, and expect another day like that tomorrow. Then we're supposed to have 2 days of warm, Saturday and Sunday, where it reaches close to 0, and then a storm begins again on Monday. I don't know how cold it will be, but there's supposed to be a lot of snow.
Do the goats, did they try to get cuddled together to try to warm up?
As long as they're of the same clan, we have what appears to be 3 different gene pools here. The brown, the black, and the white. They attack each other rather than choose to keep warm. Only the boys don't matter. They don't care. But we now are down to only 1 boy. 2 of them froze a day apart, died about 2-3 weeks ago or so. Anyways, we're down to 5 goats. Now, we had 17 at one time last year before we went to Montreal. When we came back is when they started dying, which to me suggests that we are being called out on very specific days, and on those days the system can affect by remote control some kind of activity related to gas. And the possibility is nerve gas would affect animals, and that includes humans, and therefore they don't want us to be affected in a major way until they're ready. So what they do is call us away from the property to attend a meeting at immigration or something like that. Or Tom decides that he has to go to the drugstore or has to go to the hospital on a certain day. And of course, we suspect that Tom is a T cell, opposed to a cell that can recreate the whole. His is a very task-oriented activity, whether he knows it or not. He's the person whose task it is to involve himself in communications.
Did you get sick before or after you left the property?
After.
Of course.
I told you about a time, I think it was approximately 2008. I suspected that something was happening underground that affected the water going into the sump pump area, that it was having to eject water from the basement at times that were that didn't make sense. It may have been 20 degrees below zero outside, and surplus water was being run into the sump pump area and was being pumped out. To me, it bothered me that this kind of stuff was happening, and when the summer came, I began to dig outside. What I found as I was digging were a couple of yellow bricks, like in the story of the Yellow Brick Road. That was on the northeast side of the building because that's where water comes in from the well. As I dug down, the first thing that I noticed while I was digging down in that corner was that there were pipes aimed at the house and at about a depth of 4 feet or so. I kind of identified 3 pipes, one of which I knew for certain was water from the well. The other one was a pipe that they use to bring in oxygen into the well so that you don't create a vacuum when you're pumping out. You bring in air to replace what you're taking out. Both those pipes, water and air, were normal. But there was a third pipe, one about 2 inches in diameter, that I disconnected from the house, and there was nothing in it. Didn't remark anything, and the only thing I could think of is this pipe may be used to bring in some gas at different times into the house. So I dug back towards the middle of the yard, lifting the pipe out to see where it went. But when I got about to the middle of the yard, that was about the end of the time I had for digging, and I had to start refilling. So I left the pipe sticking out of the ground about 2-3 feet, pointing straight up in the air, so that if there was anything that would come out later, I would see it in the backyard. And then I had to refill the hole because there was water coming out of the ground at about 4 feet at that time of the year. So I covered it all up and left it. This year, I've been digging on the southeast corner of the house and came across a similar situation, although it's not on the side of the sump pump. There are 2 pipes that seem to be going into the house at about 4 feet down. And one of them was a pipe. They normally put a bigger pipe with holes in it that they normally put around a foundation to direct the water that would accumulate on the surface coming down the edges of the house and redirect that to the sump pump. The only problem is it was backwards. Instead of moving water away, the setup meant that it moved water directly to the basement of the house on the opposite side of the sump pump. That, I recall, was where on 3 or 4 occasions when hydro failed and water seeped into the basement, it was not only coming out of the sump pump and rising onto the floor, but it was also coming up onto the floor on the opposite side of the house from a drain underneath the basement floor at the bottom of the outside steps, and was running into the basement from under the door. Why somebody would have set up a drainage system that aimed the water into the house, I couldn't figure out. So anyways, I cut it off and just raised the end so that it wouldn't do it again. Since then, there has been no water running into the sump pump itself. So I don't know if I've stopped it or if it's basically accumulating somewhere else. The other thing I found was another pipe exactly the same as the one on the other side that did nothing. Can't find out yet exactly where it goes to in the house, but somewhere along the back side, and I would have to raise all the patio stones to get at it. So I, again, cut it so that I could lift up at least the part I know of and stick it straight up in the air. Now, I suspect that if either one of them brought in gas, whether some kind of nerve gas or propane without smell, it would be to affect either the people in the house or set up a possibility of a fire. This propane is heavier than air, and it would settle on the basement floor, and when a furnace came on, for example, the spark would set it off, and it would explode and burn. That would explain why this house is built the way it is, not a normal house with gyprock, plaster. There's none of that in here. It's all wood, and it wouldn't take very much to burn the whole house down once a fire started. So those are two possibilities that I've come across that removes danger, potential danger to the house, but continues it in open air in the back, which may have had an effect on me when they were tied to the house, because I used to live in the basement at one time when I first moved in and had to keep an eye on Tom that he wouldn't set the place on fire. That may have caused my original problem, but it would be one way of explaining why when we were called to Montreal and came back in March 2013, that over the next few days, goats died one after the other. I think at that time we went down from 17 goats down to about 9 or 10 goats, including as well over and above that, all of the goats, female goats that were pregnant, had babies that died at birth. There were about 12 of them died at birth. If there is an automated system underground or linked to a house in the neighborhood, they could be sending some type of gas in that way. And it would explain why animals who are in the yard would receive a shot of that gas. They all had similar reactions to whatever it was that was done, and that was the loss of the ability to use their front legs as support. They were all kind of kneeling forward before they died. So it suggests that linked to the lungs, problem would begin in the lungs and the front legs would collapse. So that's the kind of stuff that began my search, And when I began to dig on the south side, I came across an impediment as I was going down. And I found, as I kept digging around it to find out its size, that it was about 18 inches across, about 3 inches in thickness, and it was made up of a lot of smaller rocks stuck together that made it appear, from what I understand, is the way meteors are made, that they appear to be one large rock traveling, but are really made up of a lot of small rocks stuck together with ice around it. And that's why you can't shoot one down, because instead of getting hit by one big one, you get hit by millions of small ones. The small ones can be the size of a bus. So the odd thing about it is that its shape is very much that of a heart, which links it to February 14th, Valentine's Day. I pulled it out and set it with the rest of the items that I've found on the farm that suggest some activity is really going on here that is not normal to a farm property. And the suggestion I've made is that this place was visited by the Vikings at a time where Europe's attention was being diverted to the Middle East by the Crusades. And for about 100 years, the Vikings did something. About the year 1000 to 1100, they were doing something here that involved a plan for the future, which was, in fact, linked to genetic engineering, which was going on in many of the ritual-bearing communities. Rituals based upon sex are not really based on sex. They are using sex as a cover to what they are actually doing. What they're actually doing is genetic engineering, and they needed to study every aspect of human life, principally memory. Therefore, would do certain things to people during rituals which would, in fact, affect their memory in a positive or negative way, which they could then study afterwards, especially by people who are involved in lineage of tribes, are in fact basically following the evolution of a gene pool, each tribe being given slightly different gene pools, genes, so that they will react under similar circumstances in different ways. May, in fact, want to make people better warriors, therefore locate the best warriors you have at the time, and when they're killed, retrieve their genetic material, and then use it to engineer future systems that are used to reanimate the genetic material of past lives into the future. That is basically the main purpose of the laboratory we currently live in, which is timed to have begun at 4000 BC or so, and will be completely cleaned away of its signs of having existed by the year 4000, giving about 7,000 or 8,000 year leeway to run this laboratory on genetic engineering. So what did the Vikings do when they came here? What did they bring here? Has been a question. Is it the material used in genetic engineering, or is it tablets that have instructions on genetic engineering and they're missing some of the information, or is it treasure of some kind to kickstart a new society? I don't know for certain. It may include some of that, but it would not be the most important part. More important would be the information one would obtain that confirms my view that we are living guinea pigs in a laboratory, the entire population of the Earth. The design is such that once a theory becomes a theory rather than just some people's thoughts, and it's by then as a theory it's proven, such as is the theory of light, the theory of fire, the theory of sound, all of these theories which are considered today proven, then they must destroy the experiment and move on to the next. That's simply the destruction of a gene pool, which basically means a population has to be removed. And of course, that's the purpose of war, pestilence, famine, and disease, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Each one has its ability to destroy a population. The way, for example, that the U.S. went through in the Civil War, that Syria is undergoing a cleansing now of a specific part of its population. Different countries in Africa have had the same thing. And all of that is basically the same story as Noah's Ark. Whether you destroy by war or destroy by flood or fire or things falling from the sky, the purpose is basically the destruction of a gene pool. The reasoning behind bringing the Vikings here at the same time as there was a march on Jerusalem may have some linkage back to the day the treasures disappeared from the temple in Jerusalem when it was destroyed in 70 AD. The second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and the goods were taken off to Rome. Then Rome was destroyed just as Jerusalem was, and obviously the Phoenicians, who controlled the Mediterranean at the time, would have been involved in moving that to Carthage, which was their headquarters across the Mediterranean from Italy. So what happened to the treasure that would have some importance to the reestablishment of a temple in a different place at another period in time, I suggest is the reason for the existence of everything I know about this farm. The site of the temple, which wasn't just a temple, it was a complex of buildings, some related to religion, some related to higher learning, some related to hospices for dying old men, and others related to hospitals for the birth of children and the genetic engineering of those children. All of that fits a pattern that exists here. Over time, the links that I've made has identified a family name that has kind of followed me in much of my life, and it comes from the name Deborah. D-E is the first two letters, and those are the same letters used to describe Deutsche, German. Bora, B-O-R-A, followed by an H. Now, B-O-R-A is linked closely to, because the letter B, D, P, Q, and sometimes G in a lowercase format look alike, but can be turned around so that the B can become a D, or flipped so that the letter can become a P or lowercase q. It is by that method that the B can be replaced with a D, and that word would then say rado with the letters scrambled, or Dora, or A-Rod. And if you take one letter away, it could be linked to a Shakespearean play, ado, A-D-O, much ado about nothing. Now, I just happened at one time in my life to be working at a place called Gestetner in Toronto, and was asked to go to Montreal because my request for a transfer was back to Ottawa, but there were no openings, and they asked me if I'd go and do some customer relations and mechanical work on equipment in Montreal. And when I got there, I found out that my boss was Bob Bora. Bora in Germany is an original name that dates back to the Bible times and is said to have been converted at one time to a new name called Mergenthaler. Now, Mergenthaler, taler at the end means a dollar coin, and Mergen is from the word Morgen, which means morning. Morning dollar coin is basically the tip left to a prostitute by a John in the morning, if the services were satisfactory. The price of the visit required that they leave a tip on the nightstand beside the bed. Now, by some strange coincidence, Mergenthaler family became associated to the printing world with the invention of portable type that could be assembled to make words and lines, and the system is called typography. Who, in fact, when I was in high school and specializing in printing, had provided me with a bursary. The typesetting world that I had specialized in was requiring some kind of activity, since the group of women provided a bursary so that I could continue my studies in Toronto. At one stage in my life, I ended up opening a branch plant in Ottawa for Mergenthaler linotype. Now, that's quite a coincidence that everything that deals with my journey to the farm is linked to Mergenthaler and Bora and the Radeau, which means raft, and the river that goes by, they call it Rideau River. And I've concluded that my life has not been my life, that I, in fact, have been genetically engineered, and that the journey I would take was being manipulated at every step of the way so that I would learn different lessons. And once lesson was learned, stopped dead in my tracks and moved to a different direction, which I can basically, after 14 years in Gestetner, fell into kind of a short-term learning session, one after the other, usually lasting 4 years or less. So now I'm on the farm, and I have the background of having looked at the farm. I have the background of being approached by a group of people called the Cell, kind of private investigators who seem, by their words and the evidence that I have substantiated, seem to be linked to something beyond this place, beyond this life, to a place they call purgatory, as opposed to a place religion, specifically Roman Catholics, remote control Roman Catholics, would call purgatory. But the task seems to be somewhat similar, and that's to cleanse the dead person of those things which they feel hinder their advancement. Purgatory cleanses policemen, military, civil servants, that type of person, of their sensitivity, and adds to them what can best be described as fascism, Nazism, makes them not care for the people that they have to interview or arrest or beat up in a war, they seem to have lost all, if not most, of their sensitivity. On the other hand, purgatory seems to be a place that says, if you've done something wrong during the lifetime you've had, then here's an opportunity for you to cleanse your program by taking some time to return and help out those people you left behind and make up for some of the damage that you've done while you were there. Some way in the sense that one would describe angels who would come, and the difference between an angel comes to increase your sensitivity to the things that you do, while archangels made here on earth want to remove any sensitivity you have about the people around you and how they should be dealt with. In that context, the story that is being told to me is that I have, in fact, been born originally in a genetic engineering experiment, which, for all intents and purposes, was faulty in its quality control. And instead of getting what they expected, they got someone who would, in fact, be middle ground, if you will, between what they wanted and what they didn't want on both sides. The issue, whether they be wanting to increase the sensitivity or decrease the sensitivity, they got someone down the middle. And although they decided to keep it as a model and test it out in a number of occasions, and I'm told that I've been reanimated 700 times since that first time, each time being placed in circumstances that showed them which side of an issue I would take. Similarly, at the same time, there was another person born attached to me, either as a twin or a sister, who has, in fact, been found to be extremely sensitive, and that person has been reanimated on a number of occasions. What I'm told is 37 times. That ended up being a person who went by the name of Angel Nagel, Jennifer Nagel, who is now my wife since 2010, yet was not allowed to come to Canada until January the 18th, 2013. Wasn't allowed to come back to Canada because she had been here before when we got married. That her role is different from mine in that she has no knowledge of anything other than her life here, and has not been given any knowledge by any individual along the way in a manner that in those 37 lives she could remember if prodded, or think about even as a possibility. However, she was given a talent linked to painting as an artist. And the story that I know of is being produced by her. Even though she doesn't know why she paints certain things, it basically links the evolution of human beings on the planet in a manner in which most people who are not involved in genetic engineering would not understand, overstand, verstand, because it begins by a painting of something that looks like blood vessels or nerves, which basically I have identified as a portrait of the structure that carries sap within a tree. And then she drew a picture of a tree, which highlights the branches, the trunk, and the roots. Therefore, the first picture basically is pointing the finger at sap, S-A-P, the life-giving force, which in human beings we would call amniotic fluid. And when a tree dies in the winter, coniferous trees, it loses its leaves. And then when things warm up again, sap returns to the tree and gives it life again, which is, in fact, the basis of genetic engineering any human life. And a tree is the origin of memory. And coniferous trees date back, as you know, to a period as early as 80 million BC, which is a long time before dinosaurs. That basic concept of sap being responsible for reanimation, I have found, is also responsible for personality. Depending on the cocktail of sap used in artificial engineering, you can pre-plan a barbarian, you can pre-plan a nun, even though they appear on the surface to be different people at extremes from one to the other. Behind the scene, one might discover, in the context of a cloister within a cloister within a cloister in a monastery, that the thought processes of nuns very similar to the thought processes of barbarians. In the world of barbarians, only they matter. It's not a matter of sensitivity. It's a matter of gimme, 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 rape, pillage, whatever, as long as I and people around me, if I were a barbarian, would want to live. There comes a time, however, where that must be disguised. Nuns are the best way to disguise barbarians. they have given themselves a personality dealing with the public, which is hypocritically different the way they deal with people when they're not being watched. One of the things that they've done in monasteries is make babies, making babies in which they could predict their personality traits, a manner which most people would not expect. By that I mean that it's one thing to produce a saint at one end of the line and a Nazi at the other end of the line. A different story, however, if you understand coding and phonetics, that they come from the same base. Saint at one end, or Nazi spelt N-A-T-S-I, such as you get around the Himalayas in countries that have Istan in their name. The normal for people who live in a hypocritic world. Doctors being among the worst take an oath, Hippocratic oath, because they have license to kill. What people don't know is they have also license to make. Therefore, if they came up with the plan for genetic engineering from a start which begins in a vat containing a designed amniotic fluid, wrote down how that took place, their helpers got a hold of the archives, basically stole the information, much as they do today around the world, take things that are in the archives that are not in everyday use and lose them. Some way these lost documents find themselves the property of nuns. Then you have a situation where the nuns, unbeknownst to the people, the scientists, the doctors, the priests, whoever gathered up the original information, no longer have, but they can then use it to produce those people who will, in fact, provide them with the resources that a cannibal or barbarian is looking for. That's eating human flesh or stealing the means of their survival. Basically, what we're dealing with today is a number, if not most people on the planet this time have been genetically engineered to serve a purpose for this originally background team of people reversed their role, serving themselves under the name God, which is dog backwards, and the feminine side of dog is called a bitch. All of this is to tell you that we've reached a point where the real fabricator of the universe we live in is known to us as matter, as in its target time where this place we called the universe, this Milky Way area of the universe, and this Earth, which revolves around a sun, has lost its way to a point where it cannot be retrieved. Therefore, matter has decided, under its role creation, to leave it behind. That we are like the ship today, which is mired in Antarctica, ice that prevents movement from one place or another. It has decided to drop in like a helicopter and lift out those people who are not responsible for the problem or who have, in fact, cleansed themselves of the problem, participating in purgatory, and move them to a different place, which they refer to as a fifth dimension, as opposed to a four-dimensional universe we live in now. What I believe I have discovered at the base of a rod, Laura, Deborah, Laura, using Mergenthaler linotype typefaces of the past, deciphered their code, which has led me to find what I believe is the rod which they set up to point to where the final instructions are for past, present, and future. That involves the treasure of the temple in Jerusalem, which was the first promised land. I say first because nothing but cosmetic activity ever happens around the number one in the code. Real activity begins with number two. That activity can be declared as the cosmetic comes first, the real activity comes second, the third activity finances the activity, the fourth activity is in charge but hidden in the background, the fifth activity defends it, and the sixth activity is the real ruler of the plan. All of that, which is incomprehensible, I would suggest to most people, the rules for moving a group of people did not cause the problems on this planet, and who have either lived, died, or sent to a waiting place, lived, died, and cleansed over a period of time, then sent to the waiting place. And another group of people who are alive today may or may not die, but are being required to lead this group much as a board of directors. I say that because in the plan laid out by the art of the sap and the tree, one looks at the final product of a tree. Basically, starts with the concept that memory lasts forever and grows along the way, ends up with a place where a chair is made. A chair is made because it is the seat of something important. The seat of something important requires a chairman or a chairwoman who then has a board of directors. Often there would be a single person with a board of directors that numbers 12, total being 13. They basically manage, much as a cabinet manages a government or corporation of any kind. On this planet, we have had people of different colors. But if you take black and white and everything in between and you merge it to the middle, I suggest that the color that comes out at the end is more red than anything else. One considers everyone was black, and then they made brown people for India, and then yellow people for Asia, and a division of yellow would in fact be Buddhism, who used the color orange. Something had to be added to the yellow in order to end up with an orange, and I suggest that that would be Persia. Building of Persia, which has PER at the front, suggests red, that the lighter colors are a derivative of that. Caucasian, which is kind of pink. So a red chair is the symbol of a person who sits either in a cosmetic way or in a functional way. Cosmetic would be like the Queen of England or Holland or Sweden or whatever it is today. Real would be like an Obama, who is a president of a democracy. Both of them have a role, one more symbolic than the other. Within the context of deciding who goes where, seems to me that where there is a doubt as to which way individuals will go, they have to be brought to a court where they are questioned on their role. However, they don't need to answer the question. They don't need to have witnesses come in and answer the question. Since creation, from the beginning of life, has included in the makeup of individuals a black box, much like an airplane or a car or a train has a memory of what they did past. This black box does not lie, cannot be changed after the fact. Therefore, we'll speak on their behalf when asked the three important questions. What did you know? When did you know it? what did you do about it? And the answer will be known, and then the door through which the people entered the court will in fact be locked, leaving only kind of three choices: that you go join the group that moves on, that you return and work off some of your indiscretions while you were around the first time, or you've been sentenced to not be a problem to any future group. And that sentence may be something like 10 million years, 5 billion years, whatever, all the way to never again, and therefore total decombination.